So several years ago, my mother gave me this book. It's called Native Wisdom for White Minds, and it's daily reflections inspired by Native peoples of the world. And last Thanksgiving, I gave her this book after she'd picked it up in my living room and started reading it and really enjoyed it. And it's called Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants. And yes, Nancy, there's a whole thing about the Maple Nation. Nancy assumed I would be talking about trees today. So the metaphor for today is a moving short. So in your mind's eye, imagine two people exchanging books, reading them separately and maybe together, and the conversations that follow. And then put that on a loop. And let it play. And maybe let it evolve. Other people maybe, different gifts, shared enjoyment, and the conversation and actions that follow. And yes, I have just given you something to distract you from the sermon, so you can do that, or hopefully it'll just underlay the sermon, but if not, you'll still get the point. So because this is Native American Sunday, and because it's something to be mindful of at all times, for thousands of years, the space where we prayerfully gather today was under the care of the Schaghticoke First Nations. Their presence in this region is remembered and woven into the history of our community. On this Native American Ministry Sunday and every day, we're encouraged to partner in repairing past harm and to move forward with awareness and respect, celebrating and embracing the contributions of First Americans. So I wanted to lift up the fact that many Native people, it's part of Native wisdom and indigenous wisdom, is that many people who live closer to the land than we tend to start their days and their public gatherings with a ritual of gratitude, naming and describing the gifts and role of everyone around them and every part of the ecosystem. The air, the earth, the water, the sun, all the animals, all the plants, all the people, those who've gone before, those who are with us now, and those yet to come. The address that I read as the call to worship, that was the first of a very, very long acknowledgement and greeting sent out to all the parts of the earth and all the things that make it up. And so that's a good place to start, is with gratitude. So what does this have to do with our gospel story? So briefly, just to, proceed, the shepherd comes in by the gate. Any others are thieves and robbers, just in it for the money. The shepherd knows the sheep, and the sheep know him, and the sheep will respond to his voice and follow where he leads. Lectionary for today has two shepherd stories, this and the 23rd Psalm. I imagine you're all pretty familiar with that. And I'll say, I've always looked at these stories as being about, discernment and following the right leader and going in the right direction. And in the 23rd Psalm, the assurance of goodness and mercy that results. I still think they're about that. I think they are. But, I never asked myself the really obvious question, which is, why do people keep sheep? I imagine that was assumed by the people who might have heard this story first. But it wasn't assumed by me, and as I thought about it, well, of course, it's not just a nice, you keep the sheep and the sheep follow you around. It's that the sheep bring something. There's a reason to have the sheep. They have something substantial and necessary. It doesn't take much to think about it. They provide wool, obviously, and milk, and meat, and continuing generations of sheep. And so what we see and what's held up here is a system of reciprocity, a free exchange of gifts, as opposed to a system of exploitation. The thieves and robbers come in and they just take. So John goes on to say that Jesus continues this story by describing that when wolves come, the shepherd cares for the sheep and will sacrifice and defend the sheep, will face danger, whereas thieves and robbers will just run away because they don't care. They're all about the taking and what's for them. So this story is, I think, about guidance, but it's also about reciprocity, about a relationship where each gives to support the other and sustains life not just for now, but for the future. So, doesn't that sound like mothers? We're celebrating mothers today, the people who guide and sustain. So we offer our celebration and our love and our gratitude to the women who love, who nurture and teach, who tend to the changing needs of the children in the best ways that they can, and who are responsible for the continuance of humanity. So I'd like to tell you just a little story, lighten things up. Many years ago, my sister-in-law was coming to visit with her family. She had 3 boys. And they stopped, they were coming cross-country from Minnesota, so they obviously needed to stop to get those boys to run their energy off. And Verna was in the parking lot of a park where they had stopped, and she looks up when she hears, "Mom, look at me!" And her son is on the top, at the edge of a huge cement embankment. She described it as being 35 feet tall. And he's standing right there on the edge. And with her heart in her mouth, she's like, "You get down here right now." And he comes down and he shows up and she says, "Do you know what I'm thinking?" And he looks at her and he smiles and he says, "How much you love me?" And that's in it, a nutshell, isn't it? We do a lot of the things we do out of love. Even when it doesn't look like it, maybe that's the motivation. We honor that today. I know for some, this is a difficult day. Maybe it's the first Mother's Day that you've celebrated after your own mother has died. At the very least, it is an occasion to think about all the good things that she brought to you, to honor that made your family what it was. And for some, the day is difficult because we're celebrating something that wasn't ideal for you, either your mother or your motherhood. And I'm sorry for that, and hope that you find forgiveness for the people involved in that. Because the fact is that motherhood is about reciprocity, the give and take as each is able. What's needed is constantly evolving, even when we're beyond the roles that we've either found so wonderful or painful. But mothers give us a gift that's not always the one we think about when we think of mothers. And that's that mothers constantly reinvent themselves. And that's a gift that they give us that is so substantial as we face life, that we have the ability to change and grow and move what we are and how we respond to the situations as needed. So I ask you to take a moment now to mentally send greetings and thanks to those in your life who've loved you and helped to shape you. So we've talked about the reciprocity of the shepherd and the sheep, and the reciprocity of mothers and the children. Native peoples have an ancient wisdom about living on the earth, and it is based, this is a surprise, on loving reciprocity. So one of the things that really struck me in this book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which is written by a woman who lives in the middle of the state and teaches at Syracuse University. But she has spent many years being both a scientist and a purveyor of ancient wisdom. And she talks about something called the honorable harvest, which is a way of living on the earth which, if we combined it with other knowledge that we have, might help us greatly. And so the rules that she cites of the honorable harvest are: know the ways of the ones who take care of you, so that you may take care of them. Introduce yourself. Be accountable as the one who comes asking for life. Ask permission before taking, and abide by the answer. Never take the first and never take the last. Take only what you need. Take only that which is given. Never take more than half, leave some for others. Harvest in a way that minimizes harm. Use it respectfully, never waste what you have taken. Share. Give thanks for what you have been given. Give a gift in reciprocity for what you have taken. Sustain the ones who sustain you, and the earth will last forever. So this sounds remarkably like another one of the lectionary readings for today, which is from Acts and describes the early Christian community. People live together in harmony, in community. They start with gratitude. They live in joy. They pool all of their goods. They share according to need. They replenish according to ability. They worship together. They dine privately or in smaller groups, but always with joy. And in this, they are saved. And Jesus adds to those who are being saved. I think to go back to the idea of the shepherd and the contrast between the loving reciprocity and the exploitation, I think this description of Jesus saving is Jesus is just showing us the way that's the loving reciprocity rather than the exploitation. So I think, we can envision this beautiful life. And when we look outside of us, we know that there's evil out there, that there are forces that are causing conflict and exploitation. There's obviously, we always lift up the people of Ukraine and the Russian aggression there. We should lift up the aggressors because perhaps they know not what they do. We lift up corporate exploitation of workers and the environment, the pollution, climate change, systemic injustice. We could go on. Obviously, we could go on and on and on and on. And today, as we talk about Native American awareness, we do need to acknowledge our history in relation to Native Americans. The land grab, the broken treaties, the schools. We bear a special responsibility in the Methodist Church for the schools because we ran some of those. We ran some of those schools that operated on that kidnapped children and forced their culture out of them. They operated on the principle of kill the Indian, save the man. Well, they didn't. And they disrupted an entire culture. And so, what is the response? You know, what do you do when there's so much out there? Well, that's why we're here. You know, that's the good news. And the good news is that we have a lot of resources to help ourselves and to help others, our little community and our world community. And so let's start with the fact that we have existing relationships. We have what is for now a connected church, and will hopefully be a connected community of believers. Within that church, we have 20,000 Native American members. We have ministries in Native American communities that help to send people to seminary, that provide education appropriately and respectfully, combining Native wisdom and Western skills. We have a shepherd to follow. I mean, we claim here that we're on a journey with Christ, questioning, serving, and growing. So we have that shepherd, that example of reciprocity. We have the examples of mothers, you know, loving care that evolves to meet needs. We have a Mother Earth that is naturally resilient. Much of this book, I would highly recommend it, maybe even as a study. She's decidedly not Christian, but there is so much that's so similar to Christianity. But she describes an earth that's resilient, that has so many examples of how to live together. You know, years ago, I stood up here and talked about the redwoods and how they form communities. That's just one example. There are so many, and there are more being discovered all the time about, you know, why goldenrod and aster grows at the same time and grows together. It's because there's a symbiotic relationship, and one that attracts pollinators and one that repels other things. So we have an earth that's resilient, and even though there is climate change, if we work with it, it will work with us. And ancient wisdom and modern science can be used together as a potent source for renewal and progress. And always here, we have found that gratitude and joy attract. They're good for us, they're good for the world. They're a great source of energy for moving out and into the places of trouble. And so today, the question, because, you know, I'll follow that too. You can do one of two. One is name a gift that you bring, you know, in that spirit of reciprocity, a gift that you see in someone else, or more generally, what reciprocity might look like in terms of us and our church and the world outside of us. So saying that again, gifts or reciprocity?
So I guess I'm running with the mic, and Deb will respond from the lectern, but are there any thoughts, responses, or other questions from what Deb has prompted us with? Would you be willing to repeat the two questions, Deb?
So what gift do you bring, or what gift do you see in somebody else that they could bring? Or what would it mean to restore reciprocity in our church, or in our community, or in our world?
I think our community, meaning us, has quite the diverse set of skills. There are some who knit, there's some who speak, there's some that communicate, there's some that are very clever with their hands, there's some that are very wise, and some that are very crazy.
I was thinking of a similar litany of gifts as I thought about this. And I hadn't added the crazy part, and that's important. We have a tradition of being a church that has fun. So.
At the risk of being slightly preachy, the Resurgence event at Saratoga Springs very much had a theme of that reciprocity aspect. Whether it be Mark's music or Galinda's remarks, it was very much rooted in recognizing that we cannot be everything in all places, but we can do our best to repair what has been damaged, to affront the forces of evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they may present themselves, but also recognize that we, as moving through this earth, are not perfect human beings, so need to have grace such that we can check ourselves when we need to be checked, but also fervor to continue pushing for all that we are called to do as we do this kingdom-building work in this world. So that's an interesting parallel reciprocity to all that we've talked about today.
Thank you. I know that there are several people in the congregation who went to that yesterday, and I think we'll look forward to hearing about it. That's a gift you can bring. So thank you, Paul. So, I think.
If there's nothing else, I'll invite Ron to help us receive our offering this morning.
Lord, your community brings this offering this morning of time, treasure, and talent. But we know there are other communities out there in need, individuals in need. May these offerings help them to bring peace, love, and justice to all. Amen. So for announcements, Paul did a great job of updating the list. So I'll just highlight a couple. One that's not in there, and this is in particular for Alice. The weekly I get the Albany District News, and one of the articles that they had in this week's news was about the relevancy of puppets, that they were still very relevant. It's an interesting article. So we have a history, a tradition of puppets in this church where we've done some very large, tall puppets and all sorts of puppets. And so I was interested in highlighting that article there. Anyway, we got Dorcas Rose's celebration coming up next Saturday. That's going to be, there's a YouTube and a Zoom link, and those are in the newsletter, electronic newsletter. If you want to join our newsletter, the little, what is it, QRC code in the back here, if you scan that with your camera, It'll take you to the web link that'll allow you to join our newsletter that comes out about twice a week. There are events at Sky Lake coming up at the end of this month and in June. And I think that's it, unless there's something else. Nancy's waving frantically. I missed something.
I just want to thank everybody who contributed to the crop walk. We exceeded our goal, and it was a lovely day, and we had a good time and raised money for those who are hungry.
And I see Paul way up waving.
Thanks, Ron, for noticing. I just wanted to add one more detail. Those who are attending Dorcas's Celebration of Life service next Saturday at 11 a.m., we invite all of those to join us in Fellowship Hall for a reception immediately following the service. There will be lots of food, fun, and fellowship.
All right, anything else? I'm not seeing anybody else waving at me. So with that, we'll have our closing hymn, number 87. It'll be on the screen. What gift can we bring?
And an Apache blessing. May the sun bring you new energy by day. May the moon softly restore you by night. May the rain wash away your worries. May the breeze blow new strength into your being. May you walk gently through the world and know its beauty all the days of your life. Amen.
if I were still close. Oh, love sunshine.